Hello, my dear students. Good morning, all of you. Today, I am here to present an online lecture on maternal recognition of pregnancy, which is your first topic of second unit in this course of obstetrics. So, let us start. Conceptus endometrial crosstalk. It is a phrase which is coined by Memo et al. 2012, and it covers the biology of some molecular signals which are given by the conceptus to the endometrium to indicate the maternal system about its presence. Now, why it is required, why conceptus gives some signals to the maternal system? Since pregnancy requires the progesterone for its establishment and maintenance throughout the gestation, and then that's why this progesterone is considered as the key hormone of the pregnancy. And the source of progesterone is, of course, corpus luteum. And if you see the pattern of cyclicity in non-pregnant animal, let us consider cow for example. After estrus, there is ovulation of the mature Graafian follicle, and immediately after ovulation, this Graafian follicle, ovulated Graafian follicle is converted into corpus luteum during the metastrus phase, and this corpus luteum secretes the progesterone hormone. And in diestrus phase, this corpus luteum remains fully functional, and on day 16 or 17, there is regression of corpus luteum. So, in pregnant animal, we need to preserve this corpus luteum throughout the pregnancy, since we require progesterone hormone for its maintenance. So, let us start. Regarding the introduction, if you see the livestock data in previous 50 years regarding production and fertility, so you will find that livestock production, like milk yield, it is increasing every year constantly, but the fertility is decreasing day by day. Now, why this fertility is decreasing and this infertility problem has become a cosmopolitan challenge to the stakeholders throughout the world, and it needs to be addressed by we veterinarians. So, let us uh, discuss about the infertility. What are the various causes of infertility and how to analyze, how to assess these causes, how to eliminate those causes to improve the fertility of dairy animals. So to understand this infertility or fertility in the any herd, the best measure or best reproductive index is the reproductive efficiency. As here you can see reproductive efficiency. Now you might remember the formula to calculate reproductive efficiency is submission rate and pregnancy rate divided by 100. So here you can see the submission rate and pregnancy rate, these are two major props upon which the reproductive efficiency depends largely. Now if you consider both the parameters submission rate and pregnancy rate, let us discuss about the submission rate. Submission rate means the proportion of those animals which are eligible for reproduction and which are presented for the insemination. To understand in a better way, let us consider one example. Suppose you are having a herd or a farm of 100 animals, and on this farm, uh, for example, there are 20 animals which are eligible for reproduction. Eligible means what? If you consider the heifers, means those heifers which has attained the age of puberty, means they are eligible for reproduction. If you consider the Paras animals, means if the animal has parturited and it has crossed the minimum voluntary wait period, means minimum 60 days after parturition, if it has closed already, it means now it is eligible for the next breeding. So in your farm, out of 100 animals, 20 animals are eligible for reproduction on today, and in next 1 week or 2 week time, how many animals of out of these 20 eligible animals you are inseminating on your farm, that is the submission rate. Suppose out of 20 animals you have inseminated 10 animals, means submission rate is 50%. So to make it 100%, what is required? First thing, those animals should exhibit estrus. First of all, if they are coming into estrus, then you are going to inseminate them. Okay. So first requirement is they should come into estrus, and the second requirement is detection of estrus. Even if all 20 animals are exhibiting estrus, but you are not detecting all those animals and you are detecting only 10 animals, it means there is fault in your estrus detection system. So submission rate depends on estrus exhibition by the animals as well as detection of estrus. Now the second parameter is pregnancy rate. Pregnancy rate means out of those inseminated animals, how many animals got conceived. It means if you see superficially these two parameters, submission rate, it approaches before insemination, and pregnancy rate, it means it is the period after insemination. Okay, so let us come back. This reproductive efficiency depends on these two parameters. Now we are more concerned about the pregnancy rate, which consider or which counts the conception rate. And early embryonic mortality is the major cause of infertility. It is an eminent cause of infertility. If you are inseminating those 10 animals and if you are getting only 5 animals as pregnant, it means your pregnancy rate is only 50%. So why these 5 animals, remaining 5 animals are not conceiving? There may be many reasons. First, there is fertilization failure, but as you know the fertilization rate is very high. It is around above 90%. In adverse to adverse situation, fertilization occurs. So the second most important cause is the early embryonic death, and this early embryonic death is attributed to impaired communication between blastocyst and maternal endometrium and insufficient hormonal support. Since you know, as we have discussed already, this early embryo requires the progesterone for its maintenance in the maternal uterus. Before implantation, how this embryo get nourishment from the uterus? After implantation, of course, through placenta, any embryo or any fetus, it get nutrition from the maternal system. But before implantation, when there is no placenta, this will acquire this nutrition from the uterine fluids, or that is called as histotroph or uterine milk. So this histotroph is synthesized under the influence of progesterone hormone, and there are other functions of progesterone to maintain the pregnancy. So progesterone is very essential. Progesterone environment is very essential for the embryonic survival. And if there is something problematic with this progesterone, embryo will not survive. So there is early embryonic mortality, and ultimately it leads to the pregnancy failure, loss of pregnancy. So how these placental hormones along with the progesterone, they are helpful to maintain the pregnancy and establishment of pregnancy, because they are very essential for the growth and development of conceptors. First of all, this progesterone along with the other placental hormones, it causes the endometrial differentiation and it maintains the function of endometrial glands, secretory function of endometrial glands, and these endometrial glands, they secrete some nourishing substance that is called as histotroph or uterine milk, which is very essential for the nourishment of early embryo before implantation. Then these hormones also play a very important role in the pregnancy recognition signaling. Apart from this, they prepare the uterine bed for the receptivity of the receptivity of the blastocyst for implantation. Apart from this, the pharmacological action of progesterone is that it suppresses the myometrial contractility, and hence it prevents the chances of abortion or premature birth, since it is making the uterus torsion. It is inhibiting the motility of myometrium up to the full term, up to the gestation, complete gestation. And lastly, progesterone also exert its immunosuppressive effect locally in the uterus, so that it can prevent the immunological rejection of the fetus. As you know, the fetus is having 50% genes from the father side. So these 50% genes means the proteins expressed from these 50% paternal genes is foreign to the mother, and hence there are chances of immune rejection of the fetus in the uterus. So progesterone locally suppresses the immunity, cellular immunity, and hence it prevents the chances of immune rejection. Now, uh, hormones from the conceptus, mainly interferon tau in the ruminants, it acts on the uterus in a paracrine manner, and it gives some signals so that this uterus will prevent the formation of luteinizing. Luteinizing is PGF2 alpha. As you know, PGF2 alpha is synthesized and secreted from uterine endometrium. So this conceptors will secrete some endocrine factors like interferon tau, which will suppress the uterus to release PGF2 alpha, so that luteinization can be prevented. And this is the purpose of MRP. So the establishment of pregnancy includes MRP as well as implantation. So in today's lecture we will discuss about the MRP only, and in the next lecture we will talk about implantation, placentation, various types of placenta and all. So let us move. Maternal recognition of pregnancy, it is also a phrase which is coined by Roger Short in 1969, and it is defined as physiological process whereby the conceptor signals about its presence to the maternal system and prolongs the lifespan of CL. And this is the purpose of MRP. Now this prolonged lifespan of CL is the characteristic feature only in those particular mammalian species where the gestation length is greater than estrous cycle. So like in ruminants, cattle, buffalo, sheep, goat, the gestation length, and if you see the cycle length, of course the gestation length is greater than cycle length. But if you see the canine species, dog and cat, feline species, where the gestation length is around 60 to 65 days, and the estrous cycle length or luteal phase is also 60 days. So there is no need for extending the lifespan of corpus luteum, as the in pregnant as well as non-pregnant animal, the CL remains for 60 days, and it is required in pregnant animals that CL should remain up to the term, and it is already the lifespan is 60 days in non-pregnant animals also. So there is no need for MRP in canine and feline species. Now, what is the significance? What is the practical utility to understand this topic, to study about the MRP? See, As you know, MRP is essential for establishment of pregnancy and for the maintenance of pregnancy throughout the gestation, because it leads to the extension of corpus luteum up to the term, means it prevents the luteolysis. Okay, so when we understand the molecular mechanism of MRP, we can develop a therapy or a drug that can rescue the pregnancy losses, which is already very much prevalent in the field condition. There is early embryonic mortality, and there is um, big, that is the big cause of infertility. So by understanding this mechanism of MRP, we can develop some therapy which can prevent these pregnancy losses by ensuring the embryo survival, and thereby we can improve the reproductive efficiency in dairy animals. And secondly, in contrast to rescue the pregnancy, we can also understand some molecular mechanism where we can suppress some enzyme, particular enzyme, or some particular reaction that can lead to the pregnancy discontinuation. Means for the contraceptive purpose, we can develop some drug that can be used as a contraceptive drug. So now we'll discuss in detail, we will go into the length of process of MRP, and you know this process of MRP leads to the prevention of luteolysis of the CA. Now if you want to understand the rescue operation of the CL, first of all we should understand the nucleolytic mechanism so that we can understand the rescuing operation. So let us discuss about the nucleolytic mechanism in particularly ruminants. So here in this picture, in this image, you can see this estrogen hormone. Here these are the luminal epithelium and superficial ductal glandular epithelium of the endometrium in the uterus. So estrogen increases the expression of estrogen receptor alpha, and which leads to the increased expression of oxytocin receptors on the same cells, and this leads to the activation of COX-2 pathway, cyclooxygenase 2 pathway, which is essentially required for the production of PGF2 alpha. And you know this PGF2 alpha is the luteolytic factor which causes the luteal regression. So let's go ahead to understand the various histological structures of uterus. As you know, the uterus is composed of three basic layers. The outermost layer is called as serosa, it is a protective layer, and the middle layer is composed of muscles, it is called as muscularis. And further it is divided into two sublayers. The external layer is longitudinal smooth muscle layer, whereas the internal layer is circular smooth muscle layer. So both these layers are called as muscularis layer, middle layer, and the internal most layer is called as endometrium. And this endometrium is again subdivided into two layers. The internal most layer is called as mucosa, and otherwise it is also called as luminal epithelium. And another layer which is just beneath the mucosa is called as submucosa. So both these mucosa and submucosa are called as endometrium. It is the internal most layer of the uterus out of three basic layers. And this submucosa is also sometimes referred as stroma. Now, as we have all discussed in previous slide, that these luminal epithelial cells and superficial ductal glandular epithelial cells, they produce PGF2 alpha, and because these cells are having some receptors for estrogen, receptors for oxytocin, and they are also having receptors for progesterone. Although progesterone receptors are also present on the muscularis layer, but these endometrial layer, it is very important to understand this leukolytic mechanism. And in the endometrium, this internalmost layer, there are some glands, uterine glands. So let us see the transverse section of a internalmost layer, that is endometrium. Here you can see this is the lumen, and this is the internalmost lining epithelium, that is the luminal epithelium, and beneath this mucosa or luminal epithelium there is stroma or submucosa, and this submucosa is having some ductal glands, uterine glands, and these glands are opening into the lumen. So the luminal epithelium and superficial ductal glandular epithelium, these both cells are very important to understand this mechanism of luteolysis, as these cells are the source of TGF2 alpha. So this is the basic biochemical mechanism of production of prostaglandins, various types of prostaglandins. This oxytocin, it is a trigger for the activation of a cytosolic enzyme phospholipase A2, which is present in the cells. When this oxytocin couples on its respective receptors, oxytocin receptors, there is activation of phospholipase A2 enzyme, and this enzyme cleaves the arachidonic acid from the membrane phospholipids. And this arachidonic acid is the precursor of all types of prostaglandins. And for the production of prostaglandins, cyclooxygenase pathway is very essential. Cyclooxygenase enzyme is very essential for the production of all kind of prostaglandins. There are two types of cyclooxygenase, 1 and 2, and through this pathway there is production of different kinds of prostaglandins. So here this is the basic model of cell membrane. As you know, every cell is composed of a cell membrane, and this cell membrane is further composed of a phospholipid bilayer. Okay, so this is the phospholipid unit, and here it is composed of two parts. One is the head, that is the phosphate group, phosphate head, and another there are tails which are composed of fatty acids. So this is the fatty acid tail, and this is the phosphate head. And this fatty acid tail, it is composed of various kinds of fatty acids. Various kinds of fatty acids means essential, saturated fatty acids, unsaturated fatty acids, and out of these fatty acids, arachidonic acid is also a type of fatty acid. So phospholipase A2 enzyme acts on this phospholipid molecule, and particularly the fatty acid tail, this fatty acid chain, where arachidonic acid is cleaved by this enzyme phospholipase A2. So we'll see the distribution or the expression, upregulation and down regulations of various kind of receptors, hormonal receptors on the uterine endometrium. So here you can see there are different stages of estrus, metaestrus, diestrus and proestrus. So during estrus, in this graph, this green line indicating the level of progesterone throughout the cycle, and this yellow line is indicating the level of or concentration of estrogen hormone in the various different phases of estrous cycle. And these shapes, yellow shape, star shape, it is indicating the estrogen receptors on the uterine endometrium. Then this green shape, It is indicating the progesterone receptors, and this cone shape, red colored cone shape, it is indicating oxytocin receptors on the uterine endometrium. So during estrus, as you know, the estrogen remains on the peak level, highest level. Okay, so this estrogen upregulates the formation or synthesis of all kind of receptors, estrogen receptors, progesterone receptors, and oxytocin receptors on the uterine endometrium. Estrogen act as a stimulus for the upregulation of all kind of receptors on the endometrial surface. Now, as there is ovulation from the Graafian follicle in the estrus phase, this ovulated follicle start to convert into the corpus luteum by the process of luteinization, and as the corpus luteum start to grow, the progesterone secretion increases gradually. Okay, and in diestrus phase it reaches to the peak level, and for some days it remains on the stationary level, peak level, and then again it drops down abruptly after luteolysis. So how this luteolysis process occur, we will see. As we have discussed already during estrus phase, estrogen stimulates the increased expression of uterine estrogen receptor alpha, progesterone receptor, and oxytocin receptors. But at that time, here you can see this gray line graph, it is indicating the production of PGF2 alpha pulses, but it is starting from diestrus in between. It is not started from the estrus phase. Okay, because as we have discussed already, for production of PGF2 alpha, the COX pathway is very essential, and again in COX pathway the precursor is arachidonic acid. For the production of PGF2 alpha, arachidonic acid is required, and this arachidonic acid comes from the cell membrane through the action of phospholipase A2 enzyme, and this phospholipase A2 enzyme remain in inactive form in the cytosol, and it is activated by oxytocin, and this oxytocin comes from the corpus luteum itself. From the large luteal cells of the corpus luteum, oxytocin is released, and when it acts on the receptors, there is production of PGF2 alpha. So here in the estrus and metaestrus phase, you can't see the PGF2 alpha pulses. Why? Because there are oxytocin receptors, still there is no production of PGF2 alpha. Why? Because at that time corpus luteum is not developed, and without corpus luteum there is no oxytocin. Although receptors are present, but oxytocin is not present, since this oxytocin is released from corpus luteum. And although there is another source of oxytocin, that is the posterior pituitary, but the boost of oxytocin from Cl is very essential for the production of PGF2 alpha. Alone, posterior pituitary oxytocin is not sufficient for the production of luteolytic pulses of PGF2 alpha, and hence when the Cl is in growing phase, it is not releasing the oxytocin, and then there is no production of PGF2 alpha. When Cl becomes mature, it will start to produce oxytocin, and this oxytocin will act on the oxytocin receptors, and there is production of PGF2 alpha. So during early diestrus, progesterone stimulates the accumulation of phospholipids. Since you know the progesterone is a steroid hormone, and all the steroid hormones are anabolic hormones, so they stimulate the accumulation of phospholipids in the luminal epithelium and superficial glandular epithelium, and after oxytocin coupling on the receptors, there is activation of phospholipase A2, and it will liberate the arachidonic acid from the cell membrane, which give rise to the production of PGF. Okay, during diestrus, what is happening? The high level of progesterone, as you can see, the progesterone graph is increasing gradually as the Cl becomes mature. So this high progesterone level act via progesterone receptors to block the expression of estrogen receptor as well as oxytocin receptors. When this progesterone increases, definitely it will going to attach on the progesterone receptors. And when this progesterone attaches on the progesterone receptors, it interacts with the progesterone receptors, it have a negative feedback on the expression of these two type of receptors, estrogen receptor and oxytocin receptors. Okay, it blocks the expression of the synthesis of oxytocin and estrogen receptors. So here in the graph you can see in estrous fields there is more number of estrogen receptors, yellow color, star shaped receptors which are estrogen receptors, as well as there is more number of oxytocin receptors also. These cone shaped red color receptors are the oxytocin receptors. So the concentration or the number of these estrogen and oxytocin receptors start to decrease in the metiestrus, and then in the diestrus there are very negligible receptors, very small number of estrogen and oxytocin receptors. Why? Because as the progesterone concentration increases, there is increased interaction on the progesterone receptors, and this leads to the suppression of estrogen and oxytocin receptors. But after some time, when there is a continuous exposure of progesterone on these progesterone receptors, it leads to the down regulation of progesterone receptors. When the progesterone acts on progesterone receptors for a prolonged time, at least around 8 to 10 days, then there is degradation of progesterone receptors. Okay, there is refractoriness, and therefore there is down regulation. There is decreased formation or decreased synthesis of progesterone receptors, and hence the block on estrogen and oxytocin receptors is removed. When there is a decreased synthesis of progesterone receptors, the progesterone hormone will not act on the more number of receptors because there are very less number of progesterone receptors. So the effect is reduced, and that's why there is again increase in the number of estrogen receptors and oxytocin receptors. And at this time, as you know, the Cl is fully functional, and the large nuclear cells of corpus luteum releases oxytocin. And when this oxytocin comes into the blood circulation in the uterus, there is availability of oxytocin receptors. So this oxytocin will interact with these respective receptors, and there is activation of phospholipase A2, and there is liberation of arachidonic acid, and the formation of PGF2 alpha through FOX pathways. So here there is production of PGF2 alpha in the uterine endometrium, particularly the luminal epithelium and superficial ductal glandular epithelial cells at around day 14 to 16. As you can see, we have discussed that a prolonged exposure of progesterone on the progesterone receptors around 8 to 10 days leads to the down regulation of progesterone receptors. Means around day 13 of the cycle there is decrease in the progesterone receptors, and which leads to the re-increase or re-expression of the estrogen and oxytocin receptors. So around 14 day of cycle, 14 to 16 day of cycle, there is production of PGF2 alpha in the uterine endometrium. Now this PGF2 alpha, it is a leucolytic substance which will cause the leucolysis, leukoregression on the Cl. Cl is present in ovary. So how this PGF2 alpha is transported from uterus to the ovary. We have already discussed about this in your previous course that this PGF2 alpha produced in the uterine horn or uterus, it is drained through the uterine venous circulation to the uterine vein and towards the heart. As you know, any organ, it is drained, it is supplied with the fresh and oxygenated blood to arterial system, whereas the impure and deoxygenated blood is swept back towards the heart for reoxygenation and filtration. So this impure blood, it is drained back through the uterine artery, and along with this blood stream, the PGF2 alpha is also swept through the uterine vein. And another artery, that is uterine artery, which is supplying the fresh oxygenated blood to the uterus and ovary. So this artery, uterine artery, it is divided into uterine artery and ovarian artery. So this ovarian artery, it is forming a complex network of the small capillaries on the uterine vein. This complex network or the plexus is adhered over the uterine vein. So there is a close proximity between the uterine vein and ovarian artery. And as you know, the direction of blood flow in both these systems, both these vessels, is just opposite. One, that is the uterine vein, which is carrying the blood from uterus towards the heart, whereas the artery, ovarian artery, it is having blood flow from heart towards the uterus or ovary. So the direction of blood flow is just opposite, and when there is opposite current of the fluid in two closed vessels, there is diffusion at a fastest rate. The substances from one artery will diffuse, from one vein will diffuse from the to the another artery. As you know, the PGF2 alpha is present in the uterine vein in a higher concentration, so it will diffuse into the ovarian artery, and this ovarian artery will carry this blood towards the ovary. So this PGF2 alpha will enter from the uterine vein into the ovarian artery, and it will reach to the ovary, where it will exert the luteolytic effect by its pharmacological action, that is the vasoconstriction. It causes vasoconstriction, and thereby it arrests the blood supply to the luteal tissue, and the arresting of blood supply will lead to the necrosis of the luteal tissue. Apart from this, it also causes the infiltration. It increases the infiltration of the neutrophils and macrophages, which leads to the digestion of the necrotic tissue. And there are some other mechanisms like infiltration of TNF alpha, that is the tumor-like necrosis factor alpha, and also infiltration of nitric oxide mechanism. There are various mechanisms. So all these things leads to the apoptotic mechanism and death of the luteal tissue. So this is how the corpus luteum is reduced. This is the luteolytic mechanism. And you can see here the progesterone acts paradoxically. It behaves diplomatically. Initially, in the metaestrus phase, when progesterone starts to rise gradually, it interacts with the progesterone receptors on the endometrium, and it suppresses the expression of estrogen as well as oxytocin receptors, which are essential for the production of PGF2 alpha. So initially it is suppressing the luteolytic mechanism, but after a prolonged exposure of 8 to 10 days, this progesterone receptors become refractory. Means these receptors start to diminish, and again there is a re-expression of estrogen and oxytocin receptors. So progesterone initially it is suppressed and later on it again induces the leukolytic mechanism. So its behavior, its action is paradoxical. Downregulation of progesterone receptor by persistent progesterone exposure involves the decrease of progesterone gene transcription. And this hypothesis is approved, is validated by one experiment where there is exogenous progesterone injection during metestrus and it leads to the decrease in the interstrus interval, means it's shortened the cycle length in sheep as well as cattle. Now, why there is decrease in the cycle length? Since you know in the metestrus the progesterone level remains on lower side. It is gradually increasing in the metestrus as the CL is in growing stage. So when we supplement this progesterone from exogenously, of course there are more number of progesterone receptors will be spared. So the it will cause suppression of estrogen and oxytocin receptors. And let's go back to the previous slide. Here you can see here when there in the metastral stage, when the progesterone remains on lower side, if we supplement from the exogenous progesterone, if we inject the animal with exogenous progesterone, the more number of receptors will be occupied and there is depression or there is suppression of the another two type of receptors, oxytocin and estrogen receptors. So the prolonged exposure of 8 to 10 days starts from a very early stage. Here you can see from this particular stage to here it was required for the suppression of progesterone receptors. This at minimum 8 to 10 days period was required for the down regulation of progesterone receptor. But when we inject exogenous progesterone, this period will start from an early phase, and that's why the production of PGF2 alpha will start from an early stage, and that's why the overall cycle length will be shorter, because as the progesterone, as this PGF2 alpha will be produced earlier by around 4 to 5 days, the cycle length will be decreased, because there will be early leukolysis, and after leukolysis animal will again come to the next estrus. So let us come back. This hypothesis is supported by this experiment. Another experiment with RU486, that is the mifepristone, which is the progesterone receptor antagonist. When this mifepristone was injected in the cyclic sheep during early luteal phase, it prolonged or it extended the interestrus interval, means it prolonged the cycle. Now, why it happened so? Let us go back to the slide which is having the various kind of receptor expression in different phases of cycle. So we are talking about the RU486, that is the mifepristone progesterone receptor antagonist. When we inject in early phase of the cycle, early luteal phase, particularly the estrus phase. So what happened? When we inject this mifepristone, it will block the progesterone receptors. Okay, as it is a progesterone receptor antagonist, so it will block the progesterone receptors and leaving a very few progesterone receptors active for the interaction with progesterone. So the suppressive effect of progesterone receptor interaction will be minimized by mifepristone, and hence this minimum period which was required for the refractoriness, that period was around 8 to 10 days, it is curtailed, because we have blocked all the progesterone receptors by mifepristone. So when this effect of mifepristone will be eliminated from the body by the by the clearance of the concentration of this drug from the kidneys. When it is cleared by the renal clearance from the body, uh, again this progesterone will act on the progesterone receptors, and this period is further extended because it requires minimum 8 to 10 days to again decrease the progesterone receptor, so that there is a re-increase of this event where the progesterone receptors are down regulating, whereas the estrogen and oxytocin receptors are up regulating. So this event will be extend by around 4 to 5 days, as we have curtailed this particular period by the mifepristone. So both these experiments they are supporting this theory. Now come to the next point. Progesterone receptor antagonists prevent. Okay, we have discussed already. This progesterone receptor antagonists prevent the progesterone-mediated downregulation of progesterone receptor gene expression, and thereby progesterone receptor maintained for an extended period. Now we have discussed about the nucleolytic mechanism. Now we will discuss about the rescuing operation. How this nucleolysis is prevented by MRP, maternal recognition of pregnancy. Particularly in the ruminants, the agent of MRP is interferon tau, and this interferon tau is a member of type 1 interferon family. As you know, the interferons are some immunologic substance. Particularly, they are liberated from the body in a viral infection. So type 1 interferon family, this interferon tau is a member of type 1 interferon family, and it is weighing around 18 to 24 kilodalton in size, and the conceptus itself, early embryo blastocyst itself secretes this interferon tau. When after hatching this conceptus or the early blastocyst hatch, the blastocyst start to elongate from a spherical shape to tubular shape then filamentous shape. This elongating blastocyst secrete interferon tau. Now this interferon tau prevents the endometrial production of nucleolytic pulses of PGF by inhibiting estrogen receptor and oxytocin receptor expression. As you know, both the receptors are essential for production of PGF2 alpha. So this interferon tau suppresses the expression of these receptors, and hence there is no oxytocin receptor, there will be no oxytocin interaction, and there will be no production of PGF2 alpha, and hence the CL is maintained. It is not neutralized, it is not regressed. The mononuclear cells of the conceptus trophoectoderm synthesize and secrete interferon tau between day 10 to 21 or 25, with maximum production on day 14 to 16, and that is the time of MRP in sheep and cattle. Interferon tau act in a parakine fashion on endometrial, luminal epithelium and superficial glandular epithelium to suppress transcription of estrogen receptor alpha and oxytocin receptor genes through interferon regulatory factor 2. So let us see this schematic diagram. Here you can see this is the conceptus. At the bottom, this white colored elongating blastocyst, this is the conceptus, and it is releasing, as we have discussed already, the trophoectodermal cells are the source of interferon tau, and this interferon tau will act on the uterine endometrium, particularly luminal epithelium and superficial glandular epithelium, through a factor, interferon regulatory factor 2, IRF2. It will suppress the estrogen receptors and then oxytocin receptors. When there is suppression of oxytocin receptors, there will be no production of PGF2 alpha pulses. Without PGF2 alpha, Cl will not be utilized, will not be regressed, and it will be maintained throughout the pregnancy. So this is the mechanism. Now interferon tau do not act through the COX-2 pathway. Means it do not suppress the expression of COX-2. Okay, and it was proved by some experiments that during pregnancy there is increase in COX-2 mRNA as well as COX-2 protein in the endometrial epithelium, and it is the indication, it is the evidence that interferon tau does not support the COX expression, COX pathway. Now, in some experiments, in vivo experiments, when they treated the cell line, bovine cell line, with interferon tau, there was upregulation of COX-2 in the cell lines, while there is decreasing of the oxytocin-induced prostaglandin accumulation, suggesting that COX-2 is not a primary target for the anti-leukolytic effect of PGF2 alpha. Although prostaglandin F2 alpha is decreased. Now, it becomes very interesting that although interferon tau is suppressing the production of PGF2 alpha, whereas in spite of increasing the concentration of COX-2 pathway. How? As you know, COX-2 pathway is required for the production of PGF2 alpha. So it is an intermediate state. The ultimate outcome is that there is decreased production of PGF2 alpha through the increased intermediate of prostaglandin pathways. Now how it happens, we will see in the next slides. So these are not related to your syllabus. Now again there is some novel concepts, novel mechanisms regarding this mechanism of MRP. The direct interference at the level of oxytocin signaling or transcription in addition to the downregulation of oxytocin receptors were observed in vivo. To the cell culture experiments, it was noticed that oxytocin receptor signaling mechanism is interfered, or the transcription in addition to the downregulation of oxytocin receptors were observed in cell culture experiments. Actually, PGF2 alpha is downregulated, PGF2 alpha is suppressed, and production is inhibited, but COX-2 pathway increased, COX-2 pathway upregulated. So how it happens? As you know, cyclooxygenase pathway is common for all kind of prostaglandins, and we know only PGF2 alpha is inhibited or suppressed, but there are chances that if COX-2 is increasing, means another kind of prostaglandins are produced, and that another kind of prostaglandin is the PGE2, and which is the nucleoprotective type of substance. It antagonizes the action of PGF2 alpha, because PGF2 alpha causes vasoconstriction, whereas PGE2 causes vasodilation. So PGE2 is increased, whereas PGF2 alpha is decreased. Interferon tau acts differentially on the endometrial luminal epithelium and glandular epithelium and stroma to regulate the expression of interferon stimulated genes. There are various kinds of interferon stimulated genes which are regulated by the interferon and which are very essential for the establishment of pregnancy. Majority of ISGs, interferon stimulated genes, increase in the response of interferon tau only in endometrial stroma and middle to the deep glandular epithelium. These are some experimental observations which are definitely not related to your syllabus. So here in this image you can see the interferon receptor 1 and interferon receptor 2. These are two subunits of the interferon receptor. Here you can see the interferon, this green colored molecule is the interferon tau, which is attaching or which is coupling on the interferon receptors. So the receptor is composed of two subunits. Okay, that is sufficient for you guys. Now, implantation and establishment of pregnancy. Okay, we will discuss later on this part. So, come to the next part. MRP infix. Unlike the ruminants, the mechanism of pregnancy recognition is quite different in swine species. The agent of MRP in ruminant was interferon tau, but this is not found in the swine, in the pigs, and in place of interferon tau, estrogen was established as an agent of MRP in pigs. Because oxytocin induced the rise of PGFM was noticed and reduced in the pregnant gilts compared to the cyclic gilts, or in gilts made pseudo-pregnant by exogenous estrogen from day 11 to 15 post-estrus. When exogenous estrogen was given in between this particular period, in pregnant as well as non-pregnant animals, the luteolysis was prohibited. Even in non-pregnant gilts also, when exogenous estrogen was given, the luteal regression was not observed. It means the estrogen acts as a luteotropic agent in swine. And some other prostaglandins which are critical for the establishment of pregnancy includes inhibition of prostaglandin synthesis, because this leads to the pregnancy failure. Some other kind of prostaglandins are very essential for pregnancy establishment. As we have discussed in the previous slide, PGE2 is a luteoprotective agent, and when we inhibit the prostaglandin production as a whole by suppressing the FOX pathways, there is no production of PGE2, and which is very essential for establishment of pregnancy, and it was well established by the experimental studies in swine that inhibition of PG synthesis, for example, FOX inhibitors like NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like meloxicam, like endomethacin, if we inject these NSAID drugs in a pregnant animal during day 11 to 15, there is suppression of production of PGE2 also, and it leads to the pregnancy failure. There is luteolysis. So basal peripheral concentration of PGFM was found to be elevated in pregnant girls on day 12. PGFM is a prostaglandin F2 alpha metabolite. It's an inactive end product of the PGF2 alpha. So it will directly indicate the concentration of PGF2 alpha. Since PGF2 alpha is a very short-lived element, because the half-life is fractions of second, so we can't measure the PGF2 alpha in the blood as such. So to measure the concentration of PGF2 alpha, we have to measure the concentration of PGFM, because it is a stable end product. and it will reflect the concentration of original product. So PGF secreted in the endometrium in the endocrine direction towards uterine vasculature and transported to the Cl exerts luteolytic effect. As you know, this PGF2 alpha is secreted in the uterine endometrium and it enters into the venous drainage of the uterus and reaches towards the ovary through this counter current mechanism. We have already studied counter current mechanism of the transport of PGF2 alpha. So when any hormone or any substance from one part of the body reaches to the another part of body through blood, this route is called as endocrine route. When any secretion from one gland reaches to the another organ in the body through blood, it is called as endocrine type of route. So there are some other concepts also, endocrine exocrine theory of MRP ruminants, and it was first described by Bazer and Thatcher in 1977, and they described that this endocrine route is diverted to the exocrine. Exocrine means when these secretions are delivered to the another system, another organ through a duct. So this is the exocrine theory, and they have proposed that PGF2 alpha change its route from endocrine to exocrine. Rather than entering into the vasculature, uterine vasculature, it enters into the uterine glands, and through uterine glands it is delivered into the uterine lumen, and where it is metabolized. So rather than reaching to the ovary, it is metabolized into the uterine lumen. So route is diverted. Transition of endocrine to exocrine secretion occurs between 10 to 12 days of pregnancy, and estrogen also changes the ratio of PGE versus PGF. And definitely this ratio requires to be high. PGE2 is a luteoprotective agent, whereas PGF2 alpha is a luteolytic agent. So this ratio should be on higher side to maintain the LH receptors in the Cl and uterus. PGE2 protects the Cl from luteolytic effect of the PGF2 alpha, and indeed estrogen directs the luteotropic effect directly. Here you can see this is the swine conceptus, and it is secreting estrogen. Unlike in ruminants where the agent of MRP was interferon tau, here the agent of MRP is estrogen. It is having two kind of actions on the corpus luteum. It upregulates the LH receptors, and you know LH is the trigger. LH is the support for the corpus luteum. As the name LH, luteinizing hormone, it induces the luteinization process in the corpus luteum, so it supports the corpus luteum. It promotes the growth of corpus luteum. So when there is increase in the number of LH receptors, there will be more action of LH on the corpus luteum. So in that way, estrogen is increasing the LH receptors, and thereby it is supporting the corpus luteum. The another action of estrogen on the uterus, particularly the endometrium, is that it is diverting the route of PGF2 alpha, which is produced in the endometrial cells, from endocrine to exocrine route. Means it is preventing the entry of this PGF2 alpha into the blood vessels, and it is diverting this PGF2 alpha towards the uterine lumen, where it is metabolized, it is destroyed. Here you can see this PGF2 alpha, it is produced from the endometrium, and here this is the image of the non-pregnant cycling saw. In non-pregnant, this PGF2 alpha is entering into the blood vessels, uterine vein, and it is reaching to the Cl. Here you can see through these blue colored vessels, these are the uterine veins, and through uterine vein this PGF12 is reaching to the ovary where it causes the luteolysis. As compared to the non-pregnant, if you see the pregnant counterpart, here what is happening? This PGF12 is still producing or synthesizing by the endometrium, but rather than entering into the blood vasculature, it is diverting towards the uterine lumen through the endometrial glands. It is delivered into the uterine lumen where it is destroyed, it is metabolized, and preventing or diverting the route of PGF12 to reach to the Cl, that leads to the extension of lifespan or the prevention of the luteolysis mechanism. And for this diversion of the route, estrogen is responsible, and this estrogen comes from conceptus itself. Now we will discuss about the MRP in mare, though the exact mechanism of MRP in mare is still mysterious. It is not clarified completely, but one thing is certain, or one thing is sure about the MRP in equine is that for establishment of pregnancy, for maternal recognition of pregnancy, or for the extension of the lifespan of Cl, the movement of the blastocyst is very essential. Movement means transuterine movement. Transuterine movement of the embryo is very essential. From one horn to another horn to first one. So this is very essential for the establishment of pregnancy, and it is approved, it is validated by some experiment by some scientists that rather than embryo, if some ball or some bead is placed into the uterus, and mechanically if it is moved from one uterus to the another, one horn to the another, and then back to the original one, if this is done through an inanimate substance like a ball or a bead, there is prevention of luteolysis. Means Cl is extended for a period of some days or some months. So it mimics the MRP. Even in absence of embryo, just the movement is sufficient to prevent the luteolysis. And these movements are done in the natural system through peristaltic movements of the uterine horns. Here you can see the transuterine migration of the blastocyst, spherical blastocyst. Suppose this is the blastocyst, spherical blastocyst, or the conceptus, and you can see the root, it is moving from one horn to the another, and then again back to the original one. So likewise there is transuterine migration of the blastocyst, and it prevents the production of PGF2 alpha from the uterine endometrium, and that leads to the prevention of luteolysis. The same, and this transuterine migration of the blastocyst begins at around day 10 of equine pregnancy. It goes on a highest frequency, highest speed on day 13 to 16, and then after day 16 it is fixed in any horn and it is implanted. Fixation occurs on day 16 to 18. But the exact mechanism, molecular mechanism, is yet to be clear. So the take-home message is that conceptus and endometrium synthesize PGE2 during early pregnancy. In this species also, PGE2 act as a luteotrophic agent and luteoprotective agent like ruminants, like swine. PGE2 antagonizes the leukolytic effect of PGF2 alpha and extends the CL lifespan, but the evidences remains to be clarified. There are a requirement of more studies in this particular species. So coming to the summary and conclusion, the day of MRP in cow is around 16 to 17, and the implantation after around day 18 to 22 of gestation. Whereas in case of eel, MRP occurs on day 12 to 13 and the implantation occurs on day 16. In case of sow, MRP occurs on day 12 and implantation occurs on day 18. Whereas in case of mare, MRP occurs on day 14 to 16 and implantation occurs quite late on around day 36 to 38 of the gestation. So here you can see MRP is the prerequisite for the implantation. MRP happens first and then there will be implantation. So for implantation, MRP is very essential. So thank you very much. Thank you all. I hope you could understand this presentation. If not completely in first attempt, you can listen again and again. And still, if you are doubtful at some point, you can ask your query directly to me. I am always there to resolve your doubts and queries. Thank you everyone. Thank you.